want to talk about in this video is hosting a game on Fantasy Grounds. Now, unlike Roll20 or other servers, the DM actually hosts the game on their physical machine, which is great. It can reduce latencies and everything like that. However, the problem is the DM's machine has to allow incoming connections, and most router firewalls will block that. So we need to just get that set up and running. So what you need to do is to check that, first of all, if you're being blocked or not, is you need to go to load the demo campaign, and you will see there's this test function here, and I'm seeing success. I'm going to hit run test, and it'll go in progress, and it'll go success, and that's the way it should be. However, the chances are when you first try it, it's not going to go to success, it's going to go to fail. So what I'm just going to quickly do is I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to switch off my router, fill out in it through, and then we'll see what will probably happen and what you can do to change that. Hi. Okay, so I've gone into my router and I've switched off things the way they would probably normally be, and I'm going to go back. I've reloaded Fantasy Ground, and I'm going to hit load campaign, and I'm going to hit run test, and it still passes. Okay, what's probably going to have to do is I'm going to have to reboot my router to get the test to fail. Okay, so it took me a bit of time to actually get the test to fail because I had to reboot routers and everything. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the test. It'll go in progress. Generally speaking, if you get a success, it's going to come back nearly straight away. But in this case, you can see it's taking a long while. And so it's sending a ping out and it's back. So it means clients can't get into it, so you can't host a game. So what to do? Well, you can attempt to switch off your Windows firewall and everything else, but 9 times out of 10 it's not going to change anything for you. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go into your router, and so you should have your router settings, or they'll be written on the back of your routing. And what we want to do is we want to forward our ports that Fantasy Ground uses. Fantasy Ground uses a TCP forwarding port of 1802, so that's the one we're going to need to adjust. The other thing we need to know is the MAC address, or the unique name that the computer that you're using is using. And the reason why we use the MAC address is because IP addresses can get reallocated all the time. So we need to know what the actual real unique identifier is, and that's the MAC address or the PC name. So to do that, hopefully your device will have some way of telling you these, and you might have this computer name in Windows or whatever. So this one, desktop CGMS wireless, is this PC. I happen to know that, but if I hover on this, I can see that I get the MAC address, and it shows me 192.168.118. If I go back to Fantasy Ground, I can see that, oh, the IP address of this machine here is 1.18, so I know it's this one. So what we're looking for is we're looking for the MAC address, or I happen to know that this router uses this name here, so which is C, and it's underscore wireless because I'm connected through the wireless. If I was connecting through Ethernet, the Ethernet card may have a different IP or MAC address, so that's what we're looking for. So that's our device here. Now, so what do we need to do? Well, generally speaking, we're going to have to go into your outward facing side of your router, and as you can see here on the internet side, I have port forwarding. So port forwarding, what we're going to do is it'll tell us that we're going to allow anything coming in on port 1802. Now this type of router does things in one way, and unfortunately not all routers are all the same. So what we need to do on this one is, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to sort out a mapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a mapping, and what do we want to do? And we'll first of all give it a name, so we call it FG port forward. And next thing we'll say it's an application. Well, what application? Well, this router comes with some pre-formatted applications, and some of your routers might actually come with games in them, or all, so you can see like pop, mail, or whatever else. And no, this one doesn't have one for specifically for the game Fantasy Ground. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to connect one. The other thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to connect the destination unique MAC address identifier of the device we want. And remember that this one here is this machine, it's desktop CG blah 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 blah. Now just because I had defaulted on my one to it does not mean it will default to it on your one, and you could end up, and I've done it in the past, after trying to port forward Fantasy Ground to my phone, which is absolutely useless. So we must say it. So what we're telling it is any incoming connections on port 1802 have to go to this machine. Okay, and this machine being that one there, wireless that. So the application. So now we need to tell it, some more rules. Where's the port forwarding? You may not have this. You may be able to, on your router, it might say forward port 1802 TCP connections to this one. And unfortunately, this one it doesn't. So all we have is to do now is select add port mapping application. And yes, well, there's none there. The one that we want doesn't exist, so we're going to have to go in and add our own. They tried to make this look more complicated than it is, so give it a name. Well, we call the other one Fantasy Ground Map, so this is the application, so we're going to call this Fantasy Ground. And the port we want is 14802, and I'm going to do this wrong, just so they give an error on this one, and internal port 1802. And TCP, I'm going to go save, and it's going to give me an error, and it goes no, port cannot be empty. So this is because it wants me a range of ports. Well, in this case, we only don't want a range of ports, we just want 1802. So it's 1802, and we hit save. So now we've created a little one-liner here that says forward any incoming ports coming in from the internet on port 1802, forward them to 1802 internally. So you might say that's a bit silly. Why have we gone through that step to do really nothing? Well, it's because we could say choose UDP, or we could internally map them, our application, to a different port number. And sometimes people like to do that for a little bit of added security. We don't need it. So we're just setting up incoming from the external, from the real world 1802 goes to our internal LAN network on 1802, and it's only TCP connections. How do I know it's only TCP connections? Because I know that Fantasy Ground only uses TCP. Okay, so it's selected here. So now what we do is we've created this little internal map. So now we must select it. And there's the one we just created, Fantasy Ground. Fantasy Ground port forwarding using this Fantasy Ground rule. Hit save. And I happen to know that this router doesn't need rebooting. Your router might be different. So, 4 porting is enabled. You can see I have these other 4 portings, 4 port forwardings, which are actually switched off. But they're not deleted, they're just not enabled. So you can actually go into your router and switch it on, switch it off if you don't like it. So that should be enough. So I go back to, just minimize that there. And now, when I run the test, it should hopefully, without rebooting the router, go back to, yes, there we go, success. So what we can do now is we know that anybody who is trying to access our machine from outside can get in. And we need to give them this. So if we give good, bard, bold, troll to anybody, they can go into join game and write that. So what I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to try and set up another instance on my other monitor and see can we get that. So just going to stop this for a second. Okay, so I've created another instance of Fantasy Ground, and here we can see it here, and I have good, bard, bold, troll. So I'll be able to select that. It doesn't want to let me select it. Anyway, we'll have to type it in manually. Okay, so what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to go and try and join the game. And give it a username. Anything doesn't really mean anything. Players in the game should have different usernames. Good, bard,